These aren't the stories your mother told you. No, these are the other stories.
Today's episode of The Other Stories is Too Black, written by Slade Stone and narrated and produced by James Barnett, aka Jimmy Horrors.
Alexander Rothschild's heart drummed when the official invitation came by carrier that morning, complete with a familiar blackened insignia on the envelope. He hadn't thought it out of the ordinary. High-profile donors often peacocked with their company status. Why should a Kishido Co. employee be any different? But as soon as the chaperoned limousine halted, an uneasy feeling overcame Alexander. The neighborhood he walked through was unfamiliar at night, even for an omniscient politician such as himself. And the gate to the property stood at least 2 stories high and steadfast, like a dutiful guard on watch. Behind that, further was the most expensive-looking cabin he had ever seen, carved of ebony and African lumber, all black just like the insignia. He adjusted the American flag pin on his lapel and approached the entryway. Before he could ring the bell, however, the double doors opened. His jaw dropped. Mr. Kishido. Before Alexander, in the flesh, stood the billionaire himself. For the past several years, the 24 hours news cycle had all but fawned over the moneymaker and his mysterious rise to fame. Dressed to the nines in an all-onyx suit with matching accessories, he ran a ringed hand through his hair. "Alex," Henry said, his voice low. "It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance. Come in, come in." Eyes thin and gleaming, the man opened his wingspan and received Alexander warmly. He smelled pleasingly of vanilla and lavender. "Sir, Alexander stuttered, pulling away in awe. I don't know what to say. This house, this land, all of it is so incredible." "Please," the man returned. "I much prefer Henry at this time in my life." Alexander nodded. Of course. My apologies, Henry." The two strode side by side through the winding hallways. As it turned out, the world's speculations about the elusive Kishido Co. owner had been starkly false. Instead of living in a bright, state-of-the-art home in the mountains of California, Henry had holed himself up in a remote cabin in southern Wisconsin. Alexander shook his head in disbelief. My district, of all places. As they walked, he gawped over Henry's imported Gothic carpets and extravagant candelabras. Couldn't help but stare at the hundreds of Fenders, Gretschers, Martins, and Gibsons that hanged on the walls, each a distinct shade of black. The house itself was a shrine for metal, complete with framed black and white portraits of Henry with dozens of musicians. Finally, Alexander worked up the courage to speak. "Henry?" "Yes, Alex." Alexander smiled. There was that classic Kishido familiarity, calling me Alex instead of Alexander. He hesitated before speaking again. "I was actually wondering why you called me here today," he said. "I understand that as a businessman you must be heavily interested in politics to some degree. But for the life of me, I don't know what I possibly could have done to warrant an invitation from my small district." From his piercing eyes to his perfectly straight posture, everything about Henry exuded power, but even in his confidence he appeared gentle. He smiled, extending an arm forward. They'd reached the very centre of the home, where a great and round chamber was. The esteemed billionaire took several steps down into the room, where a stage was. "I trust you've heard of my efforts in anger management." Alexander nodded enthusiastically. "Heard of it? I practically live by it." Henry walked up to the platform and stopped at centre stage, turning back. "You've done the program then?" "Of course, sir." Alexander smiled. I mean Henry. All of my male friends and co-workers use the system. My buddy Jake used to use it all the time. Your mental rhythmic beats program has all but cured the problem with unwarranted anger in men, young and old." Henry smiled. The spotlights from above shone down on him, illuminating each detail of his face. "Did you know I made my discovery by listening to heavy metal music?" Alexander's jaw dropped. No shit. The timbre of Henry's laugh struck a familiar chord. I was thrashing in anger one day after getting beaten up. He smiled to himself. You know, as all young and weird teenagers do. I became absolutely dumbfounded by how my body could seem so out of control. But when I put metal music on and went with the beat, I learned how to channel this anger. Alexander joined him on the stage. The spotlights blinded him. No matter where he looked, reflections from guitars and instruments alike sparkled. Henry continued. I learned that, with the power of rhythm alone, I could release my anger in a healthy way that didn't hurt anyone. Alexander paused. I'm so sorry to hear about the bullying, he said, but you have to know what you've accomplished. It's incredible. You had a world-changing idea at the age where most people were still probably failing their ACT. Rather than indulge in the compliment, Henry turned away and faced the stage's opposite end. Rows and rows of empty seats, covered in high-end black leather, faced him in return. Do you listen, Alex? He asked. Alexander cocked his head to one side. To metal music? Henry nodded. Sure, Alexander said. Practically grew up on Metallica. As did I, Henry answered. Although I will admit, growing up as a metalhead wasn't easy. Hell, that's probably the reason I got bullied so much. The story pulled at Alexander. Even though Henry had the entire world at his fingertips, he was still haunted by demons from the past. I can imagine, he paused, remembering. There was a girl at my high school who got picked on a lot for that kind of thing as well. When Henry laughed, the echo bounced across the room. The sound was so loud it rang in Alexander's ears. Let me guess. Henry grabbed one of the guitars from a stand and began plucking at it. She was a complete and total psychopath. In truth, Alexander had not thought about that part of his life in years. He racked his brains searching for memories. I guess she never did anything wrong. He shrugged. She would just do weird things. Wouldn't stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Fought back against teachers. Listened to loud music. Meaningless things. The air in the room shifted. You believe rebellion to be meaningless? Henry asked. Suddenly the spotlight on Alexander's neck fell quite literal. He paused, searching for the correct answer that might appease Henry. When he could not find one, he acquiesced. I don't understand what you mean, sir, he said. The billionaire frowned. Henry, he corrected. And you called this young teenage girl's actions meaningless, but the essence of metal music is rebellion, isn't it? Fighting against the establishment? Raging against the machine, so to speak? Alexander shrugged. I guess, when you put it that way. He wanted to say something else, but Henry did not allow it. His plucking grew louder, turned to strumming that took the air out of the room. Then, as quickly as he started playing, he stopped. What happened to her? The uneasy feeling from the limousine returned. Alexander shifted his weight from one foot to the other and stepped off the stage. I don't know, moved away, I guess. He stepped back towards the guitar-covered wall, eyes bored into the back of his skull. He could feel them. Henry was watching every movement silently. Sweat trickled down the side of Alexander's face. Finally, Henry spoke. I can tell you what happened to her, if you'd like to know. When Alexander turned around, Henry was closer. He still held the guitar, only he took strides up the auditorium steps. After being bullied out of school, her family carted her to a special school in New York City. Living in Lake Como, Wisconsin probably couldn't have been easy for a goth bitch like her. Alexander stuttered. His hands shook. Henry? The billionaire's face contorted, from the placated satisfaction he had adorned all night, to a cold stare. Her story isn't unusual, Alex, Henry said. What happened with that girl you knew happens every day across the country. Millions of us across the world are persecuted for our beliefs, for who we are, who we love, who we become. The sweat across his brow intensified. Fear opened up inside of him, and it refused to shut back in its cage. He shivered and shook, not knowing what would come next. His mind raced. I much prefer Henry at this time in my life. I was thrashing in anger one day after getting beaten up. There was that classic Cushido familiarity. Alexander's chest tightened in realization. Helen? But before he could break for the door, his hair burned like fire. Ugh! Crumpling to the floor, he clutched his head. Blood poured across the floor, speckled with shattered remains of the dented guitar Henry held. Ah, the billionaire smirked. Don't tell me you've forgotten the lovely nickname you gave me already. Alexander tried to sit up, dizzy and desperate. You knew who I was this whole time. But Henry was already pulling another guitar from the wall, another black one, with silver spikes on the end. That's the American dream, isn't it, Alex? Boy bullies girl, girl becomes boy, and boy simps over boy. He chuckled to himself. The sole of Henry's shoe was across Alexander's neck. He gasped for air as Henry laughed. Like a whip, the next guitar cracked across his spine. The strings stung, licking his skin with fire as they broke across his back. Please, he choked. The others. Ah, Henry smirked. You mean your little fearsome squad of bullies? He looked to the left. Although Alexander's eyes were filled with tears, he could still barely make out the object of his captor's interest. The black and white portraits on the wall. Only Alexander now realised the portraits weren't just of Henry with other esteemed musicians. There were also framed photographs of people Alexander recognised from high school. Jake? What? He coughed. What have you done to them? Henry smirked. Don't worry. I've made sure each got punishments that fit their crimes. He removed his foot from Alexander's neck, but it was no use. Alexander could barely move. The blow from multiple guitars had weakened him. The blood gushed from the back of his head as a splitting pain ran down his spine. No, I never had it that simple. I didn't have a choice of whether or not I was different, just like I would never choose whether or not I was a man inside. Every day, pretending to be someone I wasn't, was agony. The features in Henry's face suddenly became clearer. He transformed before Alexander's eyes. The billionaire's softness melted away and turned into the awkward, angry girl sitting at the back of the bus. Shame calls through Alexander. Memories flashed by. Ones of him throwing rocks at Helen and making fun of her outfits in geometry class. He could clearly see her tears, hear her tortured screams as Jake pushed her to the ground. They had been so cruel. The good thing about being rich, though, Henry continued, is that there's no more pretending. Now, I have the choice, and I think I'll take my time with you. Alexander tried to get up. Hands on the ground, he lifted his torso off the red-stained tiling. But it was no use. He was too weak. No, Henry grinned. And when all of this is over, give the others down there a message for me, will you? He raised the third guitar over his head. Tell them Hellmaiden Helen says hello. Alexander blinked. The room shot to black.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode of The Other Stories. To Black was written by Slade Stone, narrated and produced by James Barnett, aka Jimmy Horrors himself, with music by North Without End and Tim Coolig and Tom Robson, and sound effect provided by freesound.org. The episode illustration was provided by Luke Spooner of Carry On House. Josh Boucher is our story programmer, and along with Jasmine Arch and the eyeless ones, Mary Pastrano and Cody Czarzasty, he helps to manage our community. And a big thanks to Ben Errington for the ongoing explosion of content he fires out of his social media cannon. Slade Stone is a senior copywriter living in Chicago, Her work is featured at sladestone.com and her abstract musings at the Slade Parade. James Barnett is the producer of the Night's End podcast and After the Gloaming. Search for them wherever you get your podcasts. You can catch other works of his at jamesbarnettcreative.com. The Other Stories is a production of the Story Studio Hawk and Cleaver and is brought to you with a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license. That means don't change it, don't sell it, but by all means share the hell out of it. So,
until next time.